So typically, when you are going to do a rezone, the best advice is to start in a place in your town or your city and start there and do your rezone there first. So you pick a compact area and you say, okay, look, we're going to fix the code here. And then you work out. We decided to do the whole code at once because in the 40 years since Peterborough's code was enacted in 1970, we had been patching that code. So we had the original 1970 code, which was pretty elitist. I was pretty distressed when I went back to the base code and looked at it. Big houses on big lots close to downtown, which is, if you think about how towns grow naturally, that's not really it. Because typically when you come closer to the center of town, you have smaller lots. The houses may be big and fancy, but the lots get smaller because of that whole question of how much piping do we have to run to get to these houses.
Right.
So normally you would not say, okay, I'm going to do the whole code for the whole town. But because we had all these patches that we put on top of it, West Peterborough and TND1 and TND2 and the business, the home business rules and the rules for the town center and the rules for the village commerce, we had all the code we needed and we've been using it. So we thought, the zoning subcommittee, that we actually could make this work. We only thought that we could do this because we already had the code on the books. Okay. This was already code that we had passed as either a special district like West Pete or as an overlay district like TND1 or TND2.
Okay.
So we already had that code on the books and we knew what it built out like. We knew that TND1 builds out like Vine Street.
Right.
We had written TND2 so that it did more or less the same thing with the addition of the possibility for a little mixed use. You could have a coffee shop.
Sure.
So we took all that, and because I was the person who had the training, I did the sifting.
Yeah.
And then we would meet and we would talk about it. And what we created was what's called a form-based code. Sure. And the way form-based code works is you identify building types that are in existence in your place and that you think are okay. They are the right size, they're the right shape, they're not too tall, they're not too wide, they don't have too many blank sides. And you make those the building types for the different districts. And you do it by going from outside where it's the rural into the middle. So out here, we don't really care what you do out there in terms of your building because you're building on a big lot. Right. But as you come into the middle and into the neighborhoods around downtown, you want to make sure those buildings are not too big.
Right.
But I think what happened was there was a sense that the buildings and the density that was proposed in the new code was the buildings were too big and the underlying code was too dense. And the argument that the committee made was, well, this is the code we already have. And people said, well, we don't like that either. And I think that's what happened. And there were concerns that the side setbacks were too narrow. And there was a sense that would be possible for a developer to buy a house on a street, tear the house down and build an apartment building. So technically true.
Did anybody explicitly say that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. People
I
said
just
that.
want to make sure that wasn't something that was gleaned.
No. That was actually the argument that was made.
Okay.
And technically they're not wrong. Yes, of course. Someone could buy a single family house on 1 acre, tear it down, and build an apartment building. The biggest building that you could build was only a little bit bigger than the yellow apartment house at the corner of Cheney and Pine.
Right. Okay.
That was the
example.
Yeah.
Right.
And they said, the opponents said, well, yes, but it is a little bigger. And I'm like, yes, but not. For me, it seemed like a minimal amount of bigger. For them, it seemed like an overwhelming amount of bigger. And that's a matter of how you feel about it.